principles of spine training are the exact same for thoracic, lumbar, cervical, but the positioning we're putting you in is going to dictate what we're exactly biasing. One of the big tools online for spine mobility is a Jefferson curl, and Jefferson curls are always done in a standing position, right? If we're doing it standing, you can definitely get thoracic flexion, but being in hip extension, you're gonna be inclined to get lumbar flexion. So what we're gonna do is a seated Jefferson curl in an effort to have your lumbar spine just kind of fixed, and you're gonna lean over with the weight and bias your thoracic spine so that we can get flexion there as opposed to flexion in the lumbar, okay? So what I'm gonna ask you to do is put this bar under your legs, and you're gonna bring your legs on the other side. Go ahead and pick up the weight to the sides of your hips like this. You're basically just loading spine flexion, and we're using the weight to pull you into it. But the point is when we have you in hip flexion here, there's only so much room for your lumbar spine to actually move. So we're gonna treat this the exact same way we would any Jefferson curl, but you're gonna get thoracic bias because of the orientation you're in. So go ahead and tuck your chin first. Think cervical flexion. And then as you start coming down and you're bringing the bar to the floor, pull the bar a little bit further away from the box so there's no gliding on that. Yep, I don't want it grazing at all. You should be getting thoracic flexion to initiate the movement. And take your time with that. Now pause. Keep this totally still. Can you push this up into my hand and try to create a little bit more curvature there? And then continue to lean over. And you're basically just trying to touch the floor with the bar, but the seated position is restricting how much lumbar flexion we can get in an effort to bias thoracic flexion. Now go ahead and slowly sit back up and come out of flexion and then go into extension. Yes, so think extending lumbar spine, then extending thoracic, and you're just working your way up segmentally. And generally speaking, people are tighter in their lumbar spine as opposed to their thoracic, especially in flexion. So if you have a hard time finding thoracic flexion, just take your time with it. As I curve over, think, can I get a little bit more, right? And we're shooting for millimeters of range of motion. So same deal, go ahead and start with cervical flexion. We're tucking the chin to your sternum. We wanna make sure the bar is not grazing the box. I wanna make sure that there's real tension on that, right? We're not having any interferences with that. And then as you go into cervical flexion, keep leaning over and think, can I create curvature through the upper portion of my thoracic spine before I move down into the lower thoracic spine? And I'm sure at the beginning we feel cervical flexion because the load is pulling us to bias that portion. If you have a hard time finding it, you can spend time here and spend time at length in an effort to find that stretch reflex. So if it doesn't initiate right away, that's okay. Finding thoracic flexion is very hard for people. I wanna make sure you're not also just getting scapula protraction, right? It's very easy to let your scapula pull apart through your arms, but are you actually flexing at the thoracic spine? So that's something I want you to be mindful of and kind of take inventory of yourself to see, are we actually getting stuff at length? Continue to lean over a little bit further. Would you say you're getting thoracic flexion? You able to feel some pulling there?
Yeah.
And we feel more pulling in the thoracic spine as opposed to the lumbar spine.
Yeah.
That would be the goal. And if you're someone who feels more lumbar spine, then you just have to practice finding thoracic flexion. And then reverse, come back up nice and slow. Think extension. And then we're segmentally moving. We see how we're a little jerky doing that. Try to clean that up, the quality of movement, so that we can have a little bit of higher quality stimulus. So not just scapular retraction, extension. Yes. Yes, more thoracic extension. Beautiful, big deep breath there. And then reverse again. Think about tucking the chin. Chin is going to sternum. After we find flexion of the cervical spine, begin bringing your head down. And again, we're trying to create curvature in the upper back. The bar again swaying away from the box a little bit. That'll help us initiate that by having leverage through the load. Beautiful, keep going. At what point do you get the most thoracic spine? Right about there? Okay, take a big deep breath there. So once you feel and find the end of your thoracic flexion, try to spend time there and relax, right? We're trying to show your system what's okay, what's safe range, where can we hang out, and then see if we can get a little bit deeper, whether that means you lean over further or whether that means this stays still and you push more into me, right? So you're creating even more curvature here. And then once you feel like you kind of maxed out the amount of flexion you have there, go ahead and come back up into extension. Let's get like a set of maybe 10 there, 5 more or so. just get a feel for things, and then we'll kind of elaborate on how much more we can be doing for your thoracic spine. So again, cervical flexion, we're tucking the chin to the sternum. Once the chin is tucked to the sternum and we have flexion here, we're gonna begin working our way down, trying to find that pulling as much as we can. Yep, the scapula can open up. There's nothing wrong with getting protraction. I just wanna make sure that's not the only thing we're chasing, right? It's not just protraction, we're actually getting spine flexion. And we could do this with dumbbells by our sides. You can do it with kettlebells. I tend to like the barbell because we don't have the dumbbell kind of like grazing against your legs or anything. It's a very nice clean setup to be under your legs like this. And then go ahead and come back up into extension. Beautiful. Find full extension, so we have a contraction on the regressive now, right? You feel shortening here. And then go ahead and tuck the chin again and think, can we find regressive cervical flexion, right? Kind of our throat flexors, our cervical flexors to contract. And then as you lean over, again, finding flexion here, but also can we find some shortening in the sternum? Just like how the front of your throat is your cervical spine, just how your abs are the front of your lumbar spine, your sternum is the front of our thoracic spine. So if you feel some shortening of the thoracic tissue, of the sternal tissue, that would be your anterior spine tissue, then that's all good stuff. Continue getting as much flexion as we can. So the whole time, if my hand is right here, you are trying to push up into me while leaning over at the same time. And again, load is a relative thing. This is 30 pounds on the bar. More weight might initiate more of a stretch, but on the flip side, more weight might make you have a hard time finding the stretch. So something to think about too as you're exploring this. For those watching the video, we can see he's getting some lumbar flexion, but again, the point is that we're trying to bias the thoracic spine. And when we do a standard standing Jefferson curl, it is significantly easier to get leverage on the lumbar spine. So therefore, less load is being placed on the thoracic. So this seated orientation that we have him in hip flexion is allowing restricted movement at the lumbar spine. So there's no choice but for the load demands, the 30-pound bar, to be initiating a stretch reflex through his thoracic spine, through his upper back as opposed to the lower back. Does that kind of make sense? And again, shoulder mobility stuff, neck stuff, scapula issues, a thoracic spine biased Jefferson curl. Everyone does them standing. What if you have a client or you're an individual who gets pain doing a standing one? How can you regress them but still train spine flexion? Do it seated. Some of my worst back pain clients can only do seated Jefferson curls. And although when we do it seated, we're biasing this, they are able to find some healthy lumbar stimulus. And I'm trying to ease them into it. And then eventually we try it standing. And then, use it as a progress measure or a check to see how much are we moving forward with the ability to do it standing. Normally, extension is a very hard thing for people to find in their thoracic spine because posture sucks. Generally speaking, extension is easier to find when you train flexion first. So the idea is that if you don't have any range of motion to move into extension, creating flexions, creating that space on the posterior spine. So by definition, there's more room to move into because there's no closing side restriction. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, take a sec. We're gonna do thoracic spine extension next to contrast flexion.
Perfect.
Yeah. Right. So we're gonna train spine extension here. We can do, just like all the other tools in our tool belt, you can passive stretch. We can do isometric contractions, pails and rails. You can do eccentric loading. But for the spine, you can also do passive range holds. Okay, and that's not something that's often done. So for spine extension, a demonstration of how much range you have is like a Superman, right? This is my active extension. That's how far I can get on my own. This would be passive extension, right? Like anatomically, I can get here, but I need support. Right? I can't actively do it. But how do we bridge that gap? You do passive range holds. You hold range of motion that is technically passive in an effort to bridge the gap from here to there. Okay? So we're gonna use a band to do that. So the band varies, just like anything. Too much resistance, not enough resistance, you kind of have to tinker with it. If it's too easy, you can pull it forward, right, to create more length in the band. If it's too hard, you can pull back. But the notion here is that you are gonna be in passive extension. The band is pulling me off the floor into passive range, and guess what I'm gonna do to make it a passive range hold? And not collapse. Does that make sense? It's no different than, for example, if I am training my hip, that's my active ER, that's my passive ER, and I let go. But we're creating a setup to facilitate the passive range hold for spine extension in particular. Make sense? Yeah. Okay, I have a thicker band here if you need more resistance. We'll get a feel for it. So have you lay on your stomach, I'll hand you the band. So if you were on your own, in between reps, you would just have to stand up and reset, right, to like grab the bands. But I'm gonna hand you the band right now. So behind your head, take this. I don't really care how you go about it, whether it's like that or an overhand position. But what I want you to do is let the band pull you back. And think about peeling yourself off the floor here. Beautiful, hold that for a moment. So that's about where your passive range of extension is, right? The band is assisting you and taking off demands on your thoracic spine. Once you get a feel for where you're at here, think chest up a little more, play limbo, right there, that. You're gonna let go of the band, let it snap, and not let your chest collapse, okay? It's gonna fall some, because again, you don't own that range. So whenever you're ready, 3, 2, 1, let go, hold. Feel your thoracic extensors contracting to maintain that range of motion. And then relax. All right, another rep. Go ahead and take this. And again, it might not look like from a visual standpoint, you're getting a whole lot of range, but the point is you're contracting tissue responsible for spine extension in passive range. So you found the passive range hold. If you have a training partner, I can pull you up a little bit higher. I'm gonna let go, do not lose it. 3, 2, 1, snap the band, hold. Squeeze your thoracic extensors, all the tissue, and lumbar extensors for that matter. We're training global extension right now. It's rep number 2. We're gonna do a set of 5 there. Doing okay?
Yeah.
Hard, huh?
It's really hard.
Very hard. But again, like, when are you forced into that type of extension? Pretty much never. So, same deal, allowing the band to pull you back. So think Superman. If you have a training partner, they can help peel you up more. If you need a thicker band to peel you up, we can do that as well. Chest up more, pull away from my hand. There you go, find extension. Feel your extensors contracting before you let go. Ready, set, hold, let go of the band when you're ready, maintain extension, do not fall. Beautiful, hold, 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 and relax. We're gonna do 2 more like that. Again, find passive extension. Once you feel your spine extensors contracting, contract them harder, be more deliberate. Think, can I get my head back any further? Once that contraction is there, let go of the band and maintain that positioning. Whenever you're ready. Boom, hold, hold, chest up, chest up, chest up, and relax. You got 1 more here, and then we'll wrap that up. And you see how much easier it is to find that passive range? Like all of a sudden you're holding this no problem. Again, contracting your extensors. You're not just sitting there letting the band help you, and now you're forced to hold that range. Squeeze the extensors, man. Contract it as hard as you can, and relax it. It's hard, right? Yeah, so that's what we would do to follow up. We would do reinforcement reps to sit there and squeeze your extension. So like again, for people on the video, like if my active is here, but the band can let me go here, but then if I let go of the band, I fall here, that's fine. Because that was higher than what I could have managed without the band, right? Like it's not like you're gonna be down here and then all of a sudden you're gonna find yourself up there because you just don't have that much range. So visually on the person, they're gaining like an inch, right? Like they're maybe an inch higher from where they were actively, but that inch is significant. Just because it doesn't look significant doesn't mean it isn't significant. And you could feel how hard your spine had to work to kind of keep that upright position. And what other stimulus can you give it to actually make it contract that hard? Like when was the last time you felt your extensors be engaged like that deliberately? Like,
besides a deadlift, maybe.
And sometimes a deadlift will do that. Like especially if you have a tendency to flex, your spine has to extend to compensate. For the thoracic spine, we did flexion, then extension. We're gonna go over rotation next. For rotation, a drill that's often done is like a trunk rotation, right, with a cable, and people normally do it standing. Now think what we did with the Jefferson curl. We did it seated in an effort to bias thoracic spine. When we do it standing, yes, you can get rotation at thoracic spine, but you're inclined to rotate the lumbar spine, and you're inclined to rotate the pelvis because you're standing. So you'll see a lot of people like this, their pelvis dumps, and they rotate. but at no point did they rotate their trunk independently of their pelvis. So we're gonna do a trunk rotation, a cable rotation, but with thoracic spine bias in mind. So what that's gonna look like is we're gonna have you kneeling, and again, just doing the same drill that is typically done. We're not overcomplicating anything, but when I'm sitting in hip flexion, I am forced to just rotate at my thoracic spine. The same principle that we use for the Jefferson curl, we're applying here. We did a seated Jefferson curl to bias thoracic spine. We're doing a seated or kneeling trunk rotation to bias thoracic spine as well. But active work, no passive, no isometrics, active usage of the thoracic spine. I'll let you pick which way you start. It doesn't really matter to me, left, right. And again, just contrasting what's typically done. If someone has a hard time doing this though, because knees hurt, ankles don't like it, whatever, they can do it seated, right? Sit on a chair and do a rotation, and it would be the exact same thing. So with the arms straight away from you, we need the cable away from our center of mass. Now rotate to the left as if you're bringing the cable over to the chairs over here. Keep the stomach tight and feel the tendency to rotate from here rather than from down here at the lumbar spine, and then rotate back. And so because we're sitting in hip flexion, I actually want you to go all the way this way, but control it. So you're almost doing an eccentric for rotation to the right. And so because you're sitting in hip flexion, there's minimal movement at the lower torso. And now keep the stomach tight and then rotate all the way around. And so when we're doing it in a seated position, you don't even have to give your pelvis any thought. And that's kind of the point. How can we create a setup that facilitates the training stimulus we're looking for? And then bring it back around. Hips are completely still. I don't even have to guide you. I want you to feel the trunk rotating independently of the pelvis and feeling that thoracic spine bias. And then rotate back, all from the ribs up. Minimal movement at the lumbar spine. And so now, just now, you didn't really give your thoracic spine any thought to flexion or extension, right? Like we didn't talk about flex or extend, I just told you to rotate. We can do rotation paired with flexion extension. So we're adding layers, so pause. What I want you to do is now extend maximally, chest up. Extend maximally, all the way up, global extension. So then we're adding layers of complexity to this. How much specificity can we get in your training? So you have full extension, and now begin rotating to the left, but maintain full extension. So you're playing limbo with my pen here, and you are now training rotation with extension. Beautiful, and then rotate back. And it should feel different, but similar. Rotate all the way back, rotate all the way back. Again, the pelvis isn't moving one bit. And then we can also train flexion with rotation. So think about bringing your sternum down, and we have a little bit of relative flexion here. It doesn't mean you need to be hunched over all the way, but you're in relative flexion. So the ribs are down, stomach's tight. Beautiful, and now rotate again. And so now we have a flexion bias to our thoracic spine with rotation rather than extension. Nice. Flex harder, round it more. Yes, now rotate back to me. Pelvis is completely locked. More flexion through here, give me more, round it, round it, round it. Yes, that's what I want. You felt that difference right there? Keep the ribs down, keep pushing this into me. Think the way we generated flexion on the Jefferson curl, apply that here. Rotate. Good, good, good. Now I'm gonna add layers to it. Extend, full extension. Beautiful, now rotate back. More extension, yes, yes, yes. Now rotate back. One more time, man, come on, come on, come on. Now find flexion. Create curvature in the back. Create curvature, curvature, more, more, more. Now rotate back. Yes, yes. One more time, go into extension. Now rotate back. Well done. Does that make sense in principle? Again, it's like all about layers, right? Like we prioritize flexion, and then we went into extension. We can just do standard rotation with no emphasis on either, but we can create emphasis. And the answer isn't one or the other, it's kind of a little bit of everything, right? To complement one another. None of this substitutes one another, it complements it. And so again, if someone struggles with a ton of extension, we trained extension. How do you reinforce extension even further? Add layers to it, add rotation. But they move their pelvis too much, what do? Have them kneel. They have knee pain. How do you get them to sit and be in hip flexion? Have them sit, like on a chair. But the principle is that we're in hip flexion. There's minimal movement at the lower trunk, the lower abdomen. So therefore the upper thoracic spine, the thoracic spine has to do the work. Just biasing. You might feel some lumbar spine here. You might feel some lumbar spine and all the other stuff, but if most of the attention went to here, then that's a win. That's what we're going for. Does that make sense? Yeah. Next we're gonna go over, and that'll be the last thing we do, is thoracic segmentation in an effort to save the work. So you're gonna do cat-cow, but a variation of cat-cow, again, to bias the thoracic spine in an effort to kind of show your nervous system how to move and save the work so that you can continue to move that way after today's workout and it doesn't go to nothing. Make sense? Yeah. Okay, take a second and then we'll hit that. All right. We do the cat-cow. We are doing segmentation through the entire spine. But what happens when someone doesn't know how to do this through the thoracic spine? What do? They
just throw their head up.
They throw their head up, right? Because they know how to extend from here, but not from here. So we can create a setup to allow them to extend at the thoracic spine, like this, or I can creep forward more and extend further. So I want you to see again that I'm in this position, I'm in posterior pelvic tilt, my lumbar spine's in flexion, kind of locked down. As I come back, I am getting extension lower in my thoracic. As I come further forward, I am getting extension like almost just below my neck. Okay, so the further out my hands are, the higher up on my back I'm able to bias extension in the thoracic spine. Otherwise, it'd be very easy for somebody to, instead of doing this, they move their scapula, they move their head, they move their lumbar spine, all sorts of compensations. So let's get you on the mat on all fours, face it this way. So this would be the lowest thoracic spine bias. So think about pushing this into me here. Lumbar flexion, yep. And then round this into me. Round this into me, keep your head down, tuck your chin, create as much flexion here as you can. So right now we have global flexion. And my hands here, push into my hand and really drill that lumbar flexion. Right there, you feel that. Do not lose that positioning, that is crucial. So you're gonna bias extension all the way through here because we have you locked down at the pelvis. So what I want you to do is, without losing contact with my hand, start extending from the neck. So look up at the roof. So you have extension at the cervical spine. Begin extending from here now. So imagine I'm sitting here and I'm prying you up through your chest. You're playing limbo. Yep, yep. And you see, now pause, don't move. You see how you're still in lumbar flexion here and you're in extension through here. You are able to bias extension in an effort to lock this down. That's all it is. So now maintain flexion here and continue extending. Push this into me more. Yep. Can you get more extension from here? You see what we're doing there? We need to break this apart from this. Keep extending. Relax. Relax there. Now keep this here. Put your head down, tuck your chin, think cervical flexion, think a double chin. And now bring this up into me. Now here, push into me, push into me, push into me. There you go. Beautiful, don't lose the lumbar flexion. Yep, good, good. Keep pushing that into me. Yeah, man, thoracic flexion. And you can see that this is what's doing the most of the movement at the moment. Keep pushing, keep pushing, keep pushing, keep pushing. You kind of see how that felt? Slide your hands up to like where mine is now, even further. So again, same principle, but we're creating a setup to get you even higher. So this pushes into me. You feel lumbar flexion there. Put your head up first. Now start extending from here. But do not lose this positioning. Maintain that tight stomach and push the lumbar spine out into flexion. Do you feel yourself extending from here rather than down here? You see how the further forward your hands go, we're getting bias to the upper back. And for those watching the video, you can see we're getting wrinkles in his shirt. The area that has no wrinkles, that's what stayed flexed. So we can clearly see we're getting extension from the upper thoracic. Now keep this still. Start here now, keep your head up. Push this into me. Flexion, yeah man. Yeah man, you got it, right there. Keep pushing in, keep pushing in. Give me more, give me more, give me more. Beautiful, give me more here. Yep, 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 and then begin looking down. Think lumbar cervical flexion rather, yep. Beautiful. Now relax, don't move a thing. Slide your hands forward even more, right there. Push this into me. You feel lumbar flexion. Once you initiate lumbar flexion, you feel that pulling, extend at the cervical spine. So look up, then try extending from the upper thoracic. Beautiful. Beautiful. Keep going. Keep going. Keep trying. And for those watching the video, we can see that we're getting wrinkles in the upper back, meaning that we're actually creating extension there. And again, we're breaking this apart from this, and the setup is what's facilitating that. Now don't move a thing. Keep all this still. Put your head down first. Now bring this up. Push into me. Keep pushing into me. Keep pushing into me. Keep pushing into me. Beautiful. Beautiful. And relax. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
So just like how we do like seated spine cars, kneeling spine cars for thoracic spine, we did a seated Jefferson curl for thoracic spine bias. We did extension passive range holds, and then we did rotation with thoracic spine bias. But to finish it all off, you could also do that to start with it, right? Like a warm-up tool. We put you in a variation of cat-cow because it's so easy for people to use their necks rather than their thoracic spine. And you can probably see it on me too. As I extend from here, my upper back starts to wrinkle. That wrinkling in the shirt is what's evidence of you getting extension. And you can see the lumbar spine has no wrinkles in my shirt. And again, when we're in all fours, what do most people do? They're here, they extend, they extend, they extend, they start doing this, and then they're up here, right? They never did that. That's all we're trying to do is create a setup to allow it to make it easier. It's supposed to be hard because the area we're targeting is difficult to train, but it's to make it easier. Otherwise, it's impossible for most people. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Do you have questions on that? And again, there's a million other tools in our tool belt, but that's 3. Yeah?
Simple too.
That was good. That was real good. You're sweating a lot from that too.
Yeah, those are tough.